Today we're going to save ourselves a few €1,000 on having our own boat by making the right decisions, because today we're going to see how much it costs to own a boat with real examples and real numbers from the moment you buy it until you have it at home. But we'll see exactly what things we can save on and which things we simply can't. Don't miss it, because we're going to learn a lot about the real reality of owning a boat, maybe the slightly sad reality. Alright, and I'm going to tell you all the real numbers for this boat, mine, what it cost me, everything.
Spoiler, you don't have to be a millionaire.
I am not a millionaire.
Because you're not a millionaire and you have a boat, so...
You can be very poor and have a boat, and you may need to be extremely rich to have a boat. Greetings sailors, and welcome to a brand new episode of The Low Cost Sailor. Today we're going to talk about money, what it really costs to own a boat through the entire process, from the moment you buy it to ongoing maintenance, regular fixed expenses, taxes, fuel and other consumption and repairs. And we're going to go beyond the classic line. A boat costs its purchase price plus 10% a year in maintenance. Because that may not always be the case, since it all depends on what you do with it, how you take care of it, and above all, where you keep it. We'll see that the boat's location is going to be one of the most important factors, just like the tasks you're willing to do yourself and how often you do them. I'm going to share my experience with real numbers from the day I bought the boat all the way through the maintenance costs and repairs, but we'll also compare how those numbers can vary depending on the geographic area, the size of the boat, and of course whether we're talking sail or power. And we're also going to debunk a few very widespread ideas about changing a boat's flag, including the famous Polish flag. Today we're going to talk about the reality of it, or at least my own. The figures will be focused mainly on what things cost here in Spain, but I'm asking for help from all of you watching us from different corners of the world. I'd like to encourage you to leave a comment about how much these very same things cost in your own ports. That way together we can get a much more realistic and accurate idea of what this hobby truly costs, and whether someone can really afford it or not. Or rather, what kinds of sacrifices, effort, and little tricks it really takes to be able to enjoy it. Because I genuinely think this video can help get some of you excited so that others can see just how well you're doing, and also why not say it. Or to give more than one person a small dose of reality. My first contact with boats was thanks to Carlos and the Trastolillo. With him we have enjoyed and continue to enjoy a great deal around the Bay of Santander. And looking at it now with some perspective and doing the math, even back then I could afford it. Well, I could afford to have a friend with a boat, of course.
You could afford having a friend with a boat, and I could afford having a dad with a boat.
You see, owning boats hardly costs much at all. But anyway, one thing just led to another, and a couple of vacations renting boats around Mallorca and Ibiza made me fall completely in love with the whole idea of sailing on a sailboat, in my case. That's when I started working on getting my boating licenses so I could skipper a boat. I also found myself more friends with boats, ones I could mooch off of clearly, and I signed up for the cruising regattas held in the Bay of Santander so I could keep learning and sailing as much as possible. But circumstances, friendships, a few sacrifices, and a whole lot of hard work eventually led to me finally having my very own boat almost 10 years ago now.
10 years already?
10 years.
Look, I was gonna say I had more hair, but maybe even you had more hair too.
No, probably less. Well then, let's get to the heart of the matter. To have a boat, the first thing is to buy it, and that's what I did in 2016. And interestingly, buying a boat is one of the easiest parts of having a boat because there really are options for every budget. Whether it's a sailboat or a motorboat, there are boats for truly ridiculous prices on the second-hand market. Some people, especially outside Spain, even give their boats away because they can't use them or because they've been basically abandoned. So a boat can even cost zero. But I'm telling you, on the used market there are boats at just about every price point, and what matters a lot here is the boat's age, its overall condition, and its size, and of course also where you buy it. 6-meter motorboats like the Trastolillo, with many years on them and not very powerful inboard diesel engines, although reliable like its 50 horsepower one, can be found for under 6,000, and this without too much trouble and in reasonable condition. If you move on to more modern things, with an outboard more than 100 horsepower, relatively recent and in good condition, then prices quickly shoot up above 10,000. And of course you can go as high as you want, that's talking about second hand, because if you go for new cabin boats in those lengths, the first thing is that you'll find a lot of outboards and few inboards, and prices easily start at 40 or 50,000. Like to renovate the Trastolillo?
No, my little daughter said no, that if he wants one he should buy another, but that he should leave him the little gizmo too.
So the expenses multiply. With sailboats, something pretty similar happens. Small, older sailboats of around 7 meters can easily be found for 6,000 or even less in a condition that's, let's say, reasonably seaworthy. Here the years perhaps have a little less influence on the price because there are sailboats that age surprisingly well. What does have a huge influence is the condition, the length, and where you buy it. For example, my boat, this one, a 32-foot Beneteau Oceanis 321. I bought it for 30,000 in pretty good condition, at least good enough to quite comfortably sail it back without any real problems from La Coruña to here. These days, a boat like mine, or rather like the one I bought, because mine has had a lot of improvements, as you've been able to see in all the videos on the channel, easily goes for around 40,000 or 45,000 euros second hand. And a new equivalent one starts at around 150,000 euros. But the reality is that one of the factors that most influences finding boats at a really good price is where you actually buy them. Countries with a strong nautical tradition, such as those in Northern Europe or even France, and countries where boats aren't considered as much of a luxury item, usually have much more affordable prices. In fact, even across different regions of Spain you can find some fairly significant differences, so finding a boat that really fits your budget isn't actually that complicated. That said, there are several things you'll need to keep in mind in addition to the purchase price, because at the very moment you buy the boat, a series of expenses and taxes come up that are very important. For instance, in Spain, if the boat is brand new or if you purchase it from a company, you'll have to pay VAT. I mean, like almost everything else, 21%. Also, if the boat is more than 8 meters long, you have to add the registration tax, officially known as IEDMT, the special tax on certain means of transport. This tax is generally paid just once over the course of the boat's lifetime, as long as it remains linked to the Spanish market. What is the amount of the special tax on certain means of transport in Spain for a brand new boat that is more than 8 meters in length?
The registration tax is 12% of the boat's market value. Keep in mind that this percentage can vary by region. It's more 11% in the Canary Islands, and 8% in Ceuta and Melilla.
Hey, so as you can see, Bashan 12% Hego, so you might consider buying it into a Ceuta soon if you're purchasing a brand new boat. If it's a used boat bought from a private person, instead of VAT, you'll pay the property transfer tax there in the buyer's own autonomous community. And that usually comes to between 4% and 8% of the boat's value depending on the region. Besides that, you'll also have some administrative fees, ownership transfers, registrations, port fees. And then there are the famous navigation aids fees, which many people are unaware of. Here's something important. In Spain, many sailboats are exempt or have conditions that are quite a bit better than motorboats. For instance, sailboats that are under 12 meters in length are generally exempt from certain annual navigation aid fees. And once you've paid for all of this, the boat is officially yours. Is there any way to avoid paying even part of these taxes? Maybe by registering it under a Polish flag? Well, I'm sorry to tell you no, and in any case it's something that's enforced pretty strictly and cracked down on heavily. Customs authorities carry out a fairly large number of inspections, even on vessels flying a foreign flag, to verify that VAT has been paid correctly, and the same applies to the IEDMT. In the case of the registration tax, if the boat has ever flown the Spanish flag, then it's definitely already been paid, but if not, you'll need to be able to prove it, especially if the boat stays in Spain for more than 183 days a year. And please be very careful about trying to declare a lower amount on the bill of sale just to pay less ITP, because they really do go after that too, and I'm telling you this from my own personal experience. Because I allowed myself to be persuaded by the seller of my boat with that line of, that way you pay less in taxes and I don't have to pay as much in capital gains tax, and in the end I ended up receiving a letter from the tax agency demanding the correct amount from me. In fact, they actually even attached the original boat sale listing to prove exactly what the purchase price was. In my case, for example, the total amount was 30,000 for the boat, plus 2,400 euros for the ITP, and about 36 additional euros for fees, registrations, photocopies, and paperwork related to the transfer of ownership and the change of the boat's name. 30,12,436. But of course, that amount makes the boat officially yours, not something you can simply keep at your house. You're already the proud owner of a brand new boat, but of course, depending on where you bought it, it may still be a long way from your home or your home port, and now it's time to get it there. Basically, there are two main ways to do it, by land or by sea. If the boat is small enough, for example a small power boat or a trailerable sailboat like the famous MacGregor 26, you can probably load it yourself onto a trailer and tow it home. In Spain, the usual limits you're going to run into are a maximum beam of 2.55 meters, that the combined length of the car and trailer does not exceed 18.75 meters, and that once loaded, the combination does not exceed 4 meters in height. In practice, that leaves us with a real limit of approximately between 7.5 and 8.5 meters of length overall for normal trailerable boats. And then there's the weight category. Depending on the license you have and the type of trailer, we're talking about roughly 1,200 kilos for the boat, up to about 3,500 kilos, approximately, if we're talking about dual axle trailers and drivers with a B+C license. If that's your situation, you can take it by road, and the cost will basically be just the fuel. But if your boat is already something like mine and we're talking about specialized transport, that means you have to leave it, no matter what, in the hands of trained professionals. As a general guideline, you can estimate somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5 euros per kilometer for longer distances. Bringing my sailboat from La Coruña to Santander could very easily cost between 1,600 and 2,000 euros just for the transport itself. But of course that's not all, because first you have to take the boat out of the water with a travel lift, unstep the mast for transport, and then put everything back together and launch the boat back into the water again. So you can very easily add around 150 or 200 euros for each individual travel lift operation, and then several hundred euros more to take down, transport, and then step the mast back up again. I mean, bringing my boat overland would have cost me more than 3,000 euros for sure. The sea option is definitely usually quite a bit cheaper, especially when it comes to a sailboat. Here again, two options come up: bring it yourselves or hire a professional skipper. The operating cost of the trip will be similar in both cases because there are unavoidable expenses: fuel, food, mooring fees, if you have to stay overnight, for example. Well, but if you hire a professional skipper, then you'll also have to add their fees, which can easily run between $250 and $300 per day. And bringing a boat like mine by sailing from La Coruña can take us about 3 days at a minimum under normal conditions, so the skipper alone would already cost around $900 approximately, plus whatever it costs to move the boat over those more than 200 nautical miles. The other option, if you feel you have the necessary experience and skill, is to bring it yourselves, either on your own or together with friends.
Like you, right? You figured you already had the necessary experience and skill to do it.
Yes, and the necessary friends too. What I didn't consider was whether my friends had the necessary experience and skill. That's what I maybe should have thought about more. If you take it on yourselves, then you'll save on the skipper's total overall cost. I chose that option, and it took us roughly about 4 days to get to Santander with my friends and many hours of motoring. This brings us to the next question. How much does the boat actually cost while it's actively sailing? Before you can truly get your boat fully up and running, there's one requirement that's essentially mandatory in almost every country: insurance. In Spain, for example, it's mandatory to have at least basic liability insurance in order to navigate within its territorial waters, no matter the boat's flag. This insurance must cover any damage you might cause to both people and property, and in addition, they'll require it in practically any port in order to arrange a berth. For example, for a boat like mine, insured only for coastal navigation and with very basic third-party coverage, the price can sometimes drop to even under 100 euros a year. Is that really enough? Well, honestly, I don't think it is, because if you run into trouble at sea and you need to be towed, for example, and your insurance doesn't cover it, you can very easily end up facing fees of several hundred euros per hour. Well, I think it's around 350 euros per hour for maritime rescue, and that's usually what insurance will cover. And even if the operation isn't particularly complicated, the total cost can still quickly climb to well over 1,000 euros. But that still isn't even the absolute worst case scenario. The worst is the day you have a truly serious accident and you lose the boat. Whether you run aground on a beach, it gets smashed around for hours against the rocks, or it simply sinks right there in the harbor, at your own mooring. Because you won't simply have lost the boat and all the money you invested in it, you'll also be required to pay for the removal of the wreckage, and that bill can be extremely substantial. Removing a sunken boat from inside a harbor can already cost several thousand euros, but if it happens on a beach in a protected area, the costs can easily skyrocket to over 15,000 or even 30,000 euros. Picture how upsetting it would be to lose the boat and then think, no, now they want money from me. I mean, I'm not only crying because I don't have my boat anymore, but on top of that I also have to pay money just to cry. So personally, for me, there are two types of coverage that are basically mandatory: towing and wreck removal. In fact, they actually require this last one at quite a few marinas. This will make the premium go up just a little bit, but honestly it's absolutely worth it. I currently pay 179.26 a year for my third-party insurance, including both towing and wreck removal coverage. If you've truly spent a significant amount of money on the boat, if you've purchased a brand new one, or if you simply really don't want to take the risk of losing that entire investment, then you should probably consider getting comprehensive insurance. I'm not going to focus too much on this topic because my friend Tomas Ruiz recently made a very interesting video about it. To give you an idea, insuring a boat like mine, currently valued at around 45,000, can easily run about 700 a year with a deductible of around 500 per claim. But I'll tell you one thing, after doing all the math, going back through this episode and writing everything out, I'm seriously considering revisiting the terms of my insurance, broadening the risks covered, and I'm not sure I'll go for full coverage, but at least for fire and total loss so I can recover something. And with all of that, that's basically it. We can start putting in some real miles now. And the reality is that boating can be pretty inexpensive overall, especially when you're on a sailboat. Sailing is practically free, really. But of course, when it's time to start up the engine, fuel consumption can vary quite a lot. For example, my engine, a Yanmar 2GM20 with 18 horsepower, consumes approximately between about 1.5 liters and 2 liters of diesel per hour, depending on the RPM. That means my boat can cruise at about 5.5 knots under power while using roughly about 2 liters of fuel per hour. Another thing is, what do you call those tractor-like things that you all take out to sea? Motorboats, that crap. Those boats as nice as the Trastolillo. For example, a boat like the Trastolillo, about 6 meters long with an inboard engine cruising at about 6 or 7 knots, might be burning around 6 liters per hour. And if you run it close to maximum RPM, like Carlos does, it can easily go over 10 liters per hour. But if you move up to powerful motorboats the size of my boat, that's where things start to get serious. A motorboat that's roughly 10 meters long, equipped with two 250 horsepower inboard engines, can very easily burn about 10 or 12 liters per hour while cruising at around 7 knots. If you run it at a more economical cruising speed for this kind of boat, which often means being able to cruise at roughly around 20 knots, then we're already very easily talking about 52 liters per hour. And if you're really in a hurry and want to get close to say 30 knots, then get your wallet ready, because by that point it's pretty easy to go over 100 liters per hour. And that's specifically talking about a 10-meter powerboat. If we start thinking about the really big yachts, for example a super famous yacht, one of the fastest yachts in the world at the time, and it may honestly still be, the famous yacht Fortuna, which belonged to the Spanish royal family, could exceed 45 knots in exchange for burning several hundred liters per hour. But even so, the most powerful cargo ship in the world literally burns about 2.5 liters of fuel oil every second. In my case, over the course of 2019, I used 100 liters of diesel for the entire year. In 2020, it was 120 liters, and in 2021, another 120 liters. And all of that was back in the years when I didn't have kids, when I went out sailing an average of around 90 days a year. And I also kept track of absolutely everything. Now I don't keep track anymore, because if I keep track and try to look for any kind of profitability in this whole having a boat thing, not even with a YouTube channel. Let's stick with boats for ordinary folks and simply enjoy sailing, whether we're moving under sail or running on power. This is probably the nicest part of owning a boat, the most enjoyable and genuinely rewarding, because from here on the hardships really begin. Electronics, onboard equipment, inspections, moorings, regular maintenance, and repairs. But it's probably better if we leave this for the next episode so we can wrap things up on a good note. That way, until you watch the next one, you'll be thinking, well, maybe I'll actually go ahead and buy a boat. Thank you very much for your attention, sailors. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to receive notifications. You've got all kinds of inexpensive things in our online store and on our website, www.thelowcostsailor.com, to help you stock up your boats and to make having a boat feel a lot more affordable. What would you think if you walked into some nautical shop? Otherwise, I'd like to give a huge thank you to the people who are helping this channel and making it possible for me to keep having a boat, like our sponsor this year, Smart Sails, and all of you who help us on Patreon with your small contribution each month. In any case, we'll see each other again in just a couple of weeks in a brand new episode of The Low Cost Sailor.
You said the thing about the Trastolillo wrong. You use it, and the fuel in the Trastolillo regenerates. You come back the next day and it's full again.
You know, this is kind of like back when you lived at your parents' house and you just left the dishes sitting there in the sink. The sink doesn't do any magic at all. It doesn't just go, hojolo.
What do you mean?
And it goes, boom, you put them in, and they end up cleaning the cabinet. No, there's someone back there who makes sure that actually happens. The elves take care of all of that.
And now, how exactly do I actually get a picture of my dad dressed up as an elf?
By making an effort